Strange tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Strange Tales from Liao Zhai. Today, I'm going to bring you a story called Guardian of Literary Fate. In Pingyang Prefecture, Shaanxi, there was a man named Wang Pingzi. That year, he traveled to the capital to take the provincial examination and rented a room at Baogua Temple, located near the city. At the temple, another scholar from Yuhang had already been staying for a few days. Their rooms were next to each other, making them neighbors. Upon learning this, Wang Pingzi sent over his calling card as a gesture of courtesy, hoping to pay a visit. However, the scholar from Yuhang never returned the courtesy visit as etiquette dictated. Whenever they ran into each other, the Yuhang scholar was always aloof and dismissive, showing no manners at all. Wang Pingzi, annoyed by this behavior, decided it was best not to engage with him any further. One day, a young man came to visit the temple. He was dressed in white robes with a matching white hat, standing tall with an air of refinement. Wang Pingzi, intrigued by his presence, approached him and struck up a conversation. The more they talked, the more Wang Pingzi admired his wit and eloquence. Curious, Wang Pingzi asked, "May I ask your name and where you are from?" The young man replied, "My surname is Sung, and I'm from Dengzhou." Wang Pingzi, pleased with his company, instructed his servant to set up seats, and the two of them sat down for a chat. Just then, the Yuhang scholar happened to pass by. Out of courtesy, Wang Pingzi and Sung both stood up to offer him a seat. However, to their surprise, the Yuhang scholar walked right in and plopped himself down in the most honorable seat without the slightest hint of humility. Without warning, he turned to Sung and asked, "Are you here for the provincial exam as well?" Sung smiled and replied, "No, I am but an ordinary man. I wouldn't dare aspire to such lofty ambitions." The Yuhang scholar pressed on, "Which province are you from?" Sung answered honestly. The Yuhang scholar scoffed. "Well, choosing not to pursue advancement is at least a wise decision on your part. After all, good writers from the north are far too rare." Sung, still smiling, responded, "Perhaps there aren't many great writers in the north, but I am not one of those with poor writing skills. And while there may be many talented writers in the south, that doesn't necessarily mean you're one of them." Hearing this, Wang Pingzi burst into applause, laughing heartily as he and Sung exchanged a knowing glance. The Yuhang scholar's face flushed with embarrassment. His eyes widened in anger as he rolled up his sleeves and challenged, "Do you dare compete with me right here and now? Let's each compose something and see whose writing is better." Sung glanced to the side, chuckled softly, and said, "Why wouldn't I dare?" Without another word, he dashed back to his room, quickly returned with a copy of the Analects, and handed it to Wang Pingzi, asking him to act as the examiner. Wang Pingzi casually flipped through the pages and pointed at a line. A young boy from Confucius' household came to deliver a message. The Yuhang scholar immediately sprang to his feet, ready to fetch paper and brush to write his response. But Sung grabbed his sleeve and said, "No need to write. Let's do it orally. I already have my answer." Then, he recited, A place visited by tourists, where an uneducated and ignorant person is seen. Hearing this, Wang Pingzi burst into laughter. The Yuhang scholar, now furious, shouted. You don't even know how to answer. You're just using this as an excuse to insult me. What kind of nonsense is this? Wang Pingzi quickly stepped in to mediate. How about I pick another passage? He flipped through the book again and pointed at another line. The Shang dynasty had 3 wise men, Weizi, Jizi, and Begone. Without missing a beat, Sung began to recite. Though these 3 sages took different paths, their ultimate goal was the same. And what was that goal? It was benevolence. A true gentleman needs only to achieve benevolence. There's no need for everyone to take the exact same road. The Yuhang scholar, realizing he had lost again, remained silent. Then, standing up with a cold expression, he said flatly, Well, you do have a bit of talent. With that, he turned and walked away. After this incident, Wang Pingzi's admiration for Sung only deepened. One day, he specially invited Sung to his residence, and the two talked for a long time. Eventually, Wang Pingzi brought out all of his own writings and humbly asked Sung for guidance. Sung flipped through them at an astonishing speed, scanning nearly 100 essays in no time. Then, with a smile, he said, It's clear you've put effort into your writing. However, you lack a firm stance and conviction in your arguments. Instead, you rely on a sense of luck. Because of this, your writing tends to fall into the lower tier. With that, he went through the essays one by one, pointing out both their strengths and weaknesses. Wang Pingzi listened intently, fully absorbed, and from then on, treated Sung as a mentor, respectfully seeking his advice. That afternoon, Wang Pingzi asked the cook to make sweet-filled dumplings for Sung to try. After taking a bite, Sung's face lit up with delight. I've never tasted anything this delicious in my life, he exclaimed. Could you make them for me again in a few days? From then on, their friendship grew even closer. Every 3 to 5 days, Sung would visit Wang Pingzi, and Wang Pingzi would always serve him the sweet dumplings. Meanwhile, even the Yuhang scholar, whenever he happened to encounter Sung, seemed to have lost much of his usual arrogance. One day, the Yuhang scholar brought his own writing to Sung for feedback. Sung glanced at the paper and noticed that it had already been marked up by several of the scholar's friends, with many notes filled with high praise. But Sung simply flipped through it briefly, then pushed the paper aside without saying a word. The Yuhang scholar frowned in confusion. Suspecting that Sung hadn't actually read it, he asked him to look again. I've already read it, Sung replied. The Yuhang scholar then assumed Sung hadn't understood it properly, but Sung remained unbothered and said, What's there to misunderstand? It's just not well written. Unwilling to accept this, the Yuhang scholar protested. How do you know it's not good? You barely glanced at it. You probably just skimmed over the notes and didn't actually read my writing. To his shock, Sung began to recite the essay from memory, as if he had read it multiple times. Not only that, but he critiqued it as he went along, pointing out flaws and inconsistencies. The Yuhang scholar's face turned pale, his body broke into a cold sweat, and in the end, he had nothing left to say. Without another word, he hurriedly left. A little while later, after Sung had gone, the Yuhang scholar returned to Wang Pingzi's room and insisted on reading his essays. Wang Pingzi was reluctant, but the scholar stubbornly searched for them until he found them. Seeing that Wang Pingzi's writings were also covered with markings and annotations, the Yuhang scholar sneered. "Your essays have so many circles and dots, they look just like your sweet dumplings." Wang Pingzi, never one for quick retorts, was utterly embarrassed. His face flushed red with shame. The next day, as usual, Sung came to visit. Wang Pingzi told him what had happened the day before. Upon hearing it, Sung was furious. "I thought he had finally accepted his defeat, but I see that this southerner still dares to stoop to such petty tricks. Given the chance, I'll make sure to get back at him for this." Wang Pingzi quickly tried to calm him down. "We should be generous in spirit," he said. "There's no need to lower ourselves to his level." Hearing this, Sung was deeply moved. He admired Wang Pingzi's kindness all the more. After the provincial exam was over, Wang Pingzi showed his essays to Sung, who praised them endlessly. One day, as the two were strolling through the temple corridors, they came across a blind monk sitting under the eaves, selling medicine. The moment Sung saw him, he exclaimed in surprise. "This man is remarkable. He's known for his unparalleled ability to critique essays. We must seek his guidance." He then urged Wang Pingzi to return to fetch his writings. As Wang Pingzi was heading back to his lodging, he happened to run into the Yuhang scholar, who ended up accompanying him. When they arrived, Wang Pingzi respectfully addressed the blind monk as "master" and bowed deeply. The monk, assuming Wang Pingzi had come for medical treatment, asked, "What symptoms are you experiencing?" Wang Pingzi explained that he had actually come to seek literary advice. The blind monk chuckled and said, "Who's been spreading such nonsense? I can't even see, how could I possibly critique essays?" Wang Pingzi saw the logic in his words but suggested, "Then perhaps you could use your ears instead of your eyes? I could read my essays aloud to you." The blind monk shook his head. 3 essays, over 2,000 characters. Who has the patience to listen to all that? Just burn them instead. I'll be able to judge them by their scent. Wang Pingzi, though surprised, followed his suggestion. Each time an essay burned, the blind monk leaned in to take a deep whiff. Afterward, he nodded and said, "You've begun to adopt the writing style of the great Confucian scholars. It's not flawless yet, but you're getting close. I can already sense the essence of your essays." Unable to contain himself, Wang Pingzi asked, "So do you think I'll pass the exam?" The blind monk replied confidently, "You will." The Yuhang scholar, however, remained skeptical. To test the monk, he burned an essay written by a renowned classical writer. The blind monk sniffed deeply and then exclaimed in admiration, "Marvelous! This piece demands my utmost concentration to fully appreciate. Even masters like Gui Youguang and Hu Youxin could not have crafted such an essay." Hearing this, the Yuhang scholar was stunned. Only then did he muster the courage to burn one of his own essays. The blind monk took a sniff, but this time, his expression suddenly darkened. He wrinkled his nose and turned to the Yuhang scholar. "The last essay you burned was truly remarkable. But this must be written by someone else." Flustered, the Yuhang scholar quickly lied. The one I burned earlier was my friend's. This is my only real work. The blind monk took another sniff, then abruptly began coughing. He waved his hand in protest. Enough. Stop burning it. I can't stand the smell any longer. If I force myself to inhale any more of this, I might actually vomit. Ashamed, the Yuhang scholar turned and left without another word. A few days later, the exam results were posted. To everyone's surprise, the Yuhang scholar had actually passed and earned the title of Juren, while Wang Pingzi had failed. Wang Pingzi and Sung went to find the blind monk. The monk let out a deep sigh and said, "My eyes may be blind, but my nose still works. Unfortunately, it seems that this year's examiner is blind in both eyes and nose." As they were speaking, the Yuhang scholar strutted over, grinning smugly. Well. It seems even you, blind monk, have had your share of sugar-filled dumplings, huh? The results speak for themselves, don't they? The blind monk chuckled calmly. I judged the essays themselves. I wasn't talking about fate. But if you're so confident, why don't you gather a sample of every examiner's writings, burn them one by one, and I'll tell you exactly which one was responsible for your selection. Intrigued, the Yuhang scholar and Wang Pingzi set off to collect writings from the examiners. In the end, they managed to gather essays from 8 or 9 of them. The Yuhang scholar smirked and said, "If you get it wrong, how will you atone for your mistake?" The blind monk, now visibly irritated, snapped. "If I'm wrong, I'll dig out my own blind eyes and hand them to you." And so, the burning began. With each essay that went up in flames, the blind monk took a deep sniff, then shook his head. "Not this one," he said, again and again. But when they burned the 6th essay, something unexpected happened. The blind monk suddenly doubled over, gagging violently. Then, with a thunderous fart, he let out a sound so loud it made passers-by burst into laughter. Wiping the tears from his eyes, tears from vomiting, he turned to the Yuhang scholar and declared, "This essay was written by your teacher." At first, I couldn't tell, but the moment I caught a whiff of this one, my nose and stomach revolted. Even my bladder protested, and I had no choice but to express it through a fart. The Yuhang scholar's face turned deathly pale. He clenched his teeth in fury and spat. "I'll be back tomorrow. Don't you dare regret this. Don't you dare." Yet, 2 or 3 days passed, and the Yuhang scholar never returned. Curious, Wang Pingzi went to check his room, only to find that he had already packed up and left. At that moment, Wang Pingzi finally understood. The examiner who had selected him was, without a doubt, his own teacher. Seeing his friend's disappointment, Sung comforted him. As scholars, we should never waste time complaining about others. We must hold ourselves to a higher standard. To refrain from blaming others shows noble character, and to demand more of oneself leads to true learning. It's true that this time, fate was unfair to you. But if we're being honest, your essays weren't perfect either. Keep working hard, and in due time, you will find a judge who isn't blind. Deeply moved by Sung's wisdom, Wang Pingzi bowed in respect. He soon learned that another provincial exam would be held the following year. Determined to improve, he decided to stay in the capital and continue studying under Song's guidance. Seeing Wang Pingzi's troubled expression, Song chuckled and said, "Living in the capital is expensive, but don't worry about running out of money. There's a stash of silver buried in a cellar behind your house. You can use it however you like." He then gave Wang Pingzi detailed directions to where the silver was hidden. However, Wang Pingzi refused, shaking his head. Look at men like Dou Yi or Fan Zhongyan of the Song dynasty. They endured poverty but upheld their integrity. That's why they could serve as honest officials. Right now, I can still support myself, so how could I possibly take someone else's money and tarnish my own reputation? One day, after drinking too much, Wang Pingzi fell into a deep sleep. Seeing their chance, his servant and the cook secretly dug up the buried silver. But just as they unearthed it, Wang Pingzi suddenly woke up. Hearing noises behind the house, he went to check and was stunned to find piles of silver exposed in the open. The servant and the cook, realizing they had been caught, fell to their knees in terror. Wang Pingzi was about to scold them when something on the ground caught his eye, a golden wine cup with an inscription. He picked it up and examined it closely. To his astonishment, the engraving bore his grandfather's name. It all became clear. His grandfather had once served as an official in Nanjing before moving to the capital, where he had lived in Baogua Temple. However, he had fallen ill and passed away there. This hoard of gold and silver was, in fact, his grandfather's lost fortune. Overjoyed, Wang Pingzi weighed the silver and found there were over 800 taels. The very next day, he rushed to tell Song what had happened, even bringing the golden cup to show him. "Since this was unexpectedly left behind for me, let's split it," Wang Pingzi offered sincerely. But Song simply smiled and waved him off. "It's yours, why would I take a share?" Wanting to show his gratitude, Wang Pingzi then set aside 100 taels to give to the blind monk. However, when he went looking for him, the monk had already left. In the months that followed, Wang Pingzi devoted himself to his studies with renewed determination, burying his head in books every day. Finally, the day of the exam arrived. As Wang Pingzi prepared to leave, Song patted him on the shoulder and laughed. "If you don't pass this time, then I suppose fate really is against you." Who could have expected it? Wang Pingzi ended up violating an exam regulation and was disqualified from the examination. Before Wang Pingzi could even say a word about it, Song was already weeping uncontrollably. In the end, it was Wang Pingzi who had to comfort him instead. Through his sobs, Song lamented, "My whole life, I've been rejected by fate. I've never amounted to anything, and now I've even brought misfortune upon my friend. It's all destiny, it's all destiny." Hearing this, Wang Pingzi reassured him. Everything in this world follows its own destined course. You never sought fame or fortune in the first place. My failure in the exam has nothing to do with you, so please don't blame yourself. Song wiped his tears and whispered, "There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but I was afraid it would frighten you. The truth is, I'm not human. I'm merely a wandering ghost." Wang Pingzi froze in shock. Song sighed and continued. "When I was alive, I did have some reputation, but I was never successful in the imperial exams. Frustrated, I came to the capital, hoping to meet someone who would understand me, someone who could write my life story and pass it down. But then, in the chaos of the Jiaoshan rebellion, I lost my life. Even in death, my obsession wouldn't let me move on. I refused to be reincarnated and instead became a wandering spirit, drifting through the years. Then I met you. Sung looked at Wang Pingzi with deep emotion. You became my friend. You helped me endure my loneliness, so I did everything I could to help you succeed, to repay your kindness. I hoped that, in return, you might write my story and set my soul free. But seeing you struggle, just like I did, how could I not grieve? Tears welled up in Wang Pingzi's eyes. Then why are you still here? He asked softly. Sung let out a long sigh. Last year, the heavenly emperor issued a decree. Confucius, the sage king of learning, and the king of the underworld were tasked with reviewing the souls of those who had perished unjustly. Those of good character were given important positions in the afterlife. The rest were ordered to reincarnate. My name was recorded in the underworld registry. By law, I should have already reported for duty. But I stayed. I stayed because I wanted to see you succeed. I wanted to witness your moment of triumph, to see you truly happy. But now, I can't wait any longer. It's time for me to say goodbye. Wang Pingzi, trying to hold back his emotions, asked, What position are you going to take? Sung smiled. There's a vacancy in the palace of Zitong, the celestial office in charge of literary fortune. The role of the guardian of literary fate is currently being filled by a deaf servant, but his inability to hear has thrown the world of literature into disorder. Geniuses are being overlooked, and talent is being wasted. If I am fortunate enough to take this position, I will do everything in my power to uphold the teachings of the sages and ensure that true talent is never buried again. The next day, Sung arrived with a bright smile and said to Wang Pingzi, My wish has finally come true. Confucius asked me to write an essay on the doctrine of human nature. After reading it, he looked pleased and said that I was fit for the role of guardian of literary fate. But the king of the underworld wasn't as convinced. He reviewed my case and argued that I was careless with my words in life, so he didn't want me to hold such an important position. Thankfully, Confucius defended me, arguing on my behalf. In the end, I was granted the role. When I bowed in gratitude, Confucius called me to his desk and gave me one final warning. He said, The reason I chose you today is because I value your talent. That's why I have given you this noble and significant duty. But now that you've been appointed, you must change your ways. You must carry out your responsibilities with utmost diligence and never repeat your past mistakes. Only now do I truly understand, in the underworld, virtue matters far more than talent. You didn't pass the exam this time, not because of fate, but because your virtue is still lacking in some way. But if you continue to do good and cultivate your character, you will eventually achieve what you desire. Wang Pingzi, deep in thought, asked, If what you say is true, then what kind of virtue does the Yuhang scholar have? Sung let out a sigh. That, I do not know. But one thing is certain, the underworld never makes mistakes in matters of reward and punishment. Then he added, Do you remember the blind monk we met? He, too, is a ghost. In his past life, he was a great literary scholar. but because he carelessly discarded too many written pages, leading to waste, he was punished with blindness. Now, in order to atone for his past transgressions, he has chosen to practice medicine and heal the sick. That is why he always lingers in busy places, to help as many people as possible. Wang Pingzi, feeling emotional, ordered a feast to be prepared in Sung's honor. But Sung shook his head and refused. "No need," he said gently. "I've troubled you for a year already. Now, I must leave. Just prepare me a simple meal. Some sweet-filled dumplings will be more than enough." When the dumplings were finally ready, Wang Pingzi was too overcome with sorrow to eat. He could only sit and watch as Sung devoured them happily. After finishing 3 whole bowls, Sung patted his stomach and laughed. "That meal should keep me full for the next 3 days." Then he smiled. "I did this to commemorate our friendship. I can't actually digest human food. Everything I've eaten before, it has all turned into mushrooms behind your house. Use them to make medicine. If children eat it, they'll grow smarter." Wang Pingzi's eyes widened. "Will we ever meet again?" Sung fell silent for a moment. Then, with a bittersweet smile, he answered, "Now that I have an official duty, I must keep my distance." Wang Pingzi continued to ask, "If I go to the Zidong temple in the future and pray, will you be able to hear me?" Sung let out a soft sigh. "That won't do much good," he said. "The distance between us will be too great. But as long as you live with integrity and accumulate virtue, everything will be recorded in the underworld. When the time comes, all I have to do is check the records, and I'll know." With that, Sung bid Wang Pingzi farewell and disappeared. When Wang Pingzi went to the back of the house, he indeed found clusters of purple mushrooms. He carefully picked them and stored them away. Nearby, he also noticed a freshly dug mound of earth. Unable to resist his curiosity, he dug it up, only to find the very same sweet-filled dumplings that Sung had eaten. Back home, Wang Pingzi continued his diligent studies, always striving to do good. One night, he had a dream. In the dream, Sung arrived in an official sedan chair. Sung looked at him and said, "Once, you lost your temper over a small matter and accidentally caused the death of a servant girl. Because of this, the underworld stripped you of your destined official career. But now, through your sincere efforts to do good, you have made up for that mistake. However, your fate remains thin. Even if you pass the exams, you are not meant to serve as an official." Sure enough, not long after, Wang Pingzi passed the provincial exam and became a Hejuran. The following spring, he went on to pass the imperial exam and became a Jinsher. Yet, remembering Sung's advice, he chose not to enter official service. Wang Pingzi and his wife had 2 sons. One of them was naturally dull-witted, so Wang Pingzi fed him the mushrooms Sung had left behind. Amazingly, the child immediately became bright and intelligent. Later in life, Wang Pingzi traveled to Nanjing on some business. Along the way, he unexpectedly ran into the Yuhang scholar. The Yuhang scholar greeted him warmly. His manner was much humbler than before, but despite his young age, his temples had already turned gray. At the end of the story, the author offers his own commentary. The Yuhang scholar's arrogant boasting showed that his writing was not entirely without merit. However, his overbearing and conceited attitude made him utterly unbearable, even for a moment. Heaven had already long since abandoned him, and even the spirits mocked him. Yet, had he been able to cast aside selfish desires and cultivate his character, he could have navigated the treacheries of court life with ease. He would not have suffered exhaustion and premature aging. Alright. That's all for today's strange tale, Guardian of Literary Fate. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Feel free to leave your comments and share with others. See you again in the next issue.